Water. Earth. Fire. Air. Long ago, the four nations lived together in harmony. Then, everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked. Only the Avatar, master of all four elements, could stop them. But when the world needed him most, he vanished. 100 years passed and my brother and I discovered the new Avatar, an airbender named Aang. And although his airbending skills are great, he has a lot to learn before he's ready to save anyone. But I believe Aang can save the world. Water.
Hey, everybody. Hi, everyone. Hello, hello.
Hello.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Let me make sure real quick that everybody can talk to everybody else in the chat. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. Bryan, if you want to come on, you're good to go, man. Hey, there he is.
Hey.
Howdy.
There's the man of the hour. Hi, how are you?
Doing all right. Thanks for having me.
Everyone, thank you for joining us. Let us know what part of the world you're coming from and what time it is over there. We got like, Bryan, usually have like a worldwide attendee audience crowd. And, you know, Kira's over in Singapore, so it's like
Awesome.
2 o'clock in the morning over there. Oh, Seattle.
That's right.
Yeah, you know, I've been mentoring for this awesome organization of yours, and yeah, I've got mentees all over the globe too. So
It's wild, isn't it?
yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah. Sometimes I'll have like mentees, and I'll meet people like Kira. I had Kira once for a session, and it's just, and what other situation can you connect with someone, you know, halfway across the world, and then just talk about this stuff, you know, talk about animation and talk about, you know, their portfolio and help them out with that kind of stuff. And it's really moving. It's touching sometimes, especially like in quarantine, man.
No, it's great. I mean, animation has brought me all over the world, and I've had an opportunity to, you know, work with people. Even back on Zim, I was like 24 years old, and they sent me over to South Korea to work with the animation staff, and that was great. And I made friends that I'm still in touch with from back then, and
yeah,
I love the idea. You know, I think as artists, like at least the way I've always felt to myself, like you don't really feel like you quite fit in, you know, but then it's like being like like wizards and warlocks and witches or something. It's sort of like, oh, you know, you recognize other weirdos like yourself, you know. And so I don't know, I connect more with like an animator on the other side of the world than I maybe do people I grew up down the street from or something.
Gotcha,
you know?
right.
So I love that. Yeah. I love that art brings everybody together, and we sort of speak that language, you know, like music or something. So
definitely. Yeah. Gosh, I have yet to go over to Korea. Bryan, what would you say, like, where are you coming from? Like, where's your hometown? And see if anyone's from your hometown. I wonder.
I moved around a lot. So I'm from a lot of places, you know. A lot of people, you know, just grow up in one place. I was born in Cleveland, Ohio. I moved to suburbs of Atlanta. I moved to suburbs of Louisville, Kentucky. I moved back to the suburbs of Atlanta. I went to art school in Cincinnati for a year for my foundation year. And then I transferred to RISD in Rhode Island. And then I graduated. I lived in New York City for a little bit. Then I moved out to LA and, you know, spent a summer in South Korea when I was working on the pilot of Avatar.
Right.
Spent some little bit of time here and there in New York City again, and taught at RISD one winter session.
Right.
But mostly I've been in LA for what feels like an eternity. But I'm trying to escape. So.
Hey man, it's possible now, right? Kind of, sort of. We can make it.
I escaped. So.
Oh, that's right.
I am in an undisclosed location. So.
Well, thank you everybody for coming. Indonesia, awesome, great. Thank you everyone for joining us this morning. It's an honor to have you, Bryan, and Kira, I should point out, is my gracious co-host, co-moderator for this panel. So for anyone who doesn't know Kira, Kira Rodriguez graduated from Nanyang Polytechnic School of Interactive and Digital Media in Singapore. So 2 o'clock in the morning over there. And thank you, Kira, for being here. Back when we started Rise Up, Kira took it upon herself to start the Discord channel for the Rise Up community, which was fantastic resource for everybody, super supportive of all the mentees, and they were sharing feedback. I remember going on there, and it's wonderful. And so currently Kira is volunteering with Rise Up as a part of the media and public relations team. So thank you for co-moderating this with me, Kira. It's glad to have you. And yeah.
I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And with that, I'm going to introduce our guest panelist, Bryan Konietzko. Yay! I hope I pronounced it right. Oh my goodness.
Sure, that works. I don't even know if I pronounce it right, so that's fine.
Oh dear. Okay. All right. So here's a short intro. We try to keep it short and sweet. Bryan graduated from RISD in 1998, where he met his friend and future collaborator, Michael. And Bryan then later joined Michael in Los Angeles, where Michael helped him get his foot in the door in the TV animation industry, where they worked on Family Guy, Mission Hill, and King of the Hill. And in 2000, Bryan worked at Nickelodeon on Invader Zim as a storyboard artist and art director. And when that show ended in 2002, Bryan and Michael were recruited by Eric Coleman to create and pitch their own series to Nickelodeon. And the result, as we all know it, was Avatar the Last Airbender, which premiered in 2005. In 2012, they premiered the sequel series, Legend of Korra. And in 2021, this year, Nickelodeon launched Avatar Studios, headed by Bryan and Michael, to produce new feature and series animation in the extended Avatarverse. Bryan, is there anything that you'd like to highlight that I missed?
No, that sounds awesome. That sounds accurate.
Yeah, and that's fairly recent. Those those announcements. So congratulations, man. That's
Thank you.
amazing.
Thanks. Yeah, it's really exciting, and I keep saying to Mike, like, how did we end up with this? This is kind of a grown-up job, you know.
Yeah.
It's kind of daunting, but it's really exciting and quite a rare opportunity. So we're really excited.
Yeah, it's an honor to host you, and it's great to see everyone on the chat.
Thanks for having me. Like I said, I've been working with Rise Up, mentoring with your awesome organization for about a year now, year and change, and it's been great. And I've met some absolutely incredible artists and really cool people, and I'm really as I was telling you before we jumped on, the way I like to mentor is just for the long haul. So I just pick a few people and just try to be available to them for the duration of their journey, their artistic journey, and just provide any help I can. So thank you to you. And I know there's a lot of people behind Rise Up that make it run. And I just want to commend you all for a wonderful organization.
Thank you, man, for being a part of it. So today, let's get into it. Today, Bryan is going to share with us his process for pitching projects. So without further ado, Bryan, if you want to take it away, we're here to bounce off ideas.
Yeah, I'll just ramble, and then please interject as much as you want.
Sure.
But so my big disclaimer on this is that, like, this is one person's take on it, and I want everybody to know that. I think there can be a perception out there that there's a right way and a wrong way to pitch, and that, if someone is successful, by some metric, that what they say is the right way to do it. And I think you have to keep in mind that it's important. I think it's valuable and important to see people, someone that has a show or a movie or a project, video game, whatever, that you really like and admire. I think it's important to hear how they got it made. How did they get their foot in the door? How did they get some big company with a bunch of money and interested, to take a risk on their project. But I think you have to take each of those stories with a grain of salt, and you have to keep them in context and remember that there are no rules, and there are books on pitching, and there are workshops on pitching, and there's lectures like this. But I think the important thing to realize is that there are so many factors. I always think about it like, I'm not much of a video game player, but like kind of like Mario Brothers or something, where you're kind of running the gauntlet, and there are all these things swinging, and it's just like a matter of timing. And what I mean by that is, it's not just the idea that you're pitching, and it's not just who you are or who you're pitching to. It's also what that studio or network or production company might be looking for at that time. And it might be the zeitgeist of when you're pitching and what you're pitching. Do those things line up? And there are so many factors. And honestly, if we had pitched Avatar like 6 months earlier or 6 months later, it never would have happened. Even if we pitched it to the same person at the same studio, it might not have happened. And it's not because we did anything right or wrong necessarily. It's just there are a lot of extenuating circumstances, a lot of factors that are out of your control. Now, what can you do with that? That just sounds like random and like, oh, you have no control. I think the thing to keep in mind is, I really only believe in pitching things that you believe in. Don't just pitch something because you think it's going to get made. And the reason, there are a lot of reasons for that. And don't get me wrong. Look, if you're like, I need to eat, and this is my only means of survival, I would say there are other ways to make a living in art, in animation. You don't have to like pitch a show and be running a show and put your whole heart and soul on the line. There are easier ways to make a living than running a show. I think you should pitch something you really believe in, but at the same time, you can't be so precious with it and put all of your hopes and desires and your like all of your happiness on whether or not this one project's going to go through or not, because there are just the statistics are against everybody. It's so hard to get a show made, even in this day and age when there's more animation being made than probably at any other time on Earth. There are more platforms for animation. There are more types of animation being made, especially in the West, than at any other time. So that's good. It increases chances. But still, not everyone's going to get a show made. And I think it's important to enjoy the journey. Even if you do pitch and you say you get some interest. I had like looked at other people, other colleagues, peers in the industry when I was coming up in animation, and I had seen them. I hadn't pitched anything yet at this point, and I had seen them like maybe they got a pilot made or something, and they had just like put all of like kind of invested this idea that was the idea of success for them, and if it didn't go, they were just crushed. And I can understand that, but so I just looked at it and I took a sort of like Zen attitude. Like, if I ever get in that position, like, I'm just going to try to enjoy each part of it, each part of the process, because whether or not it goes, you do your best, you swing your hardest, but a lot of it is out of your control. I mean, Invader Zim, that show I got to work on it, and then one day it just got shut down. I mean, one day they just sat everybody down and said, pack up, go home. So much of it is out of your control, and I just don't think it's wise or healthy to sort of hinge your own like self-worth and happiness on whether or not this thing is going to happen. So I really tried hard to just do my best to enjoy each part of the process. And I figured the only real goal I had was like, I really hope Mike and I at least get to make a pilot, like a test pilot, because it'd just be neat if someone else paid for us to get to make some animation. You know, and I was like, that'd be cool. And then even if it never aired, we'd have this cool thing, and then I could use that to try to open some other doors and do some cool projects. And Alfonso Cuarón,
you're taking it bit by bit.
Yeah, just enjoy each part of it, because if you are always looking towards some future success or some sort of like constructed metric of success of, oh, I'll be happy then, you'll be miserable now. And you won't, like, maybe you don't get there, but you spend a bunch of years toiling trying to get there, and then you're like, well, it wasn't worth it. You know, why did I do that? I didn't meet that success. But if you just go, I got to work with my friends on the most fun thing I've ever done. We convinced some corporation to pay for it. And now we have this cool thing that didn't exist before. That's cool, you know? And then like, oh, and then someone might see it, and then I might get to work on something else that's cool. And so that was my only kind of goal. The other thing is that you may be miserable in each of those stages anyway. So don't make yourself more miserable by pining for some kind of glory or whatever. So, but anyways, so it's a weird mix of like, it's a bit contradictory, but I really believe that you've got to pitch something you love, you really love, and you really believe in, but you're also not too precious with, so that if it doesn't happen, you're okay. Or if it, if a studio, also I'm a big believer in protecting the core of the idea and not getting so precious with the little details, because honestly, you've got to have faith in yourself to come up with better ideas than you did initially. And then you also have to realize that it's not worth fighting over these tiny little details, but it is worth fighting over the core principle and like identity of your project. But you're not just making it for yourself. You've got to find that Venn diagram between what a big corporation needs. And I think it's easy for artists to be like, the suits and all this, but it's like, hey, these are humans whose jobs are on the line for a lot of money, like millions of dollars. It's not that you get them, it's like the show takes millions of dollars to make. That's a huge risk, and that risk is on people's heads. It's on their jobs and it's on their careers. And you've got to at least keep that. That's just reality, and you have to keep that in mind. So it's like, all right, well, this company has interest. Now, us as trickster artists, the goal is, again, that Venn diagram. What is the company's needs, and what are my needs as an artist, as a weirdo, as a creative, as this person who just has this stuff I've got to get out, these things I want to express and communicate and reflect back to the world and back to society and stuff. So that's a lot of philosophy, but I mean, this is the stuff I don't know that people always talk about, and I think it's important to keep in mind. So what were you gonna say, Kira?
Sorry, I was gonna say, like, it's something like finding the middle ground between like what the corporation wants and what you want to convey in your own message. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And if you're trying to shove something through that doesn't fit what they need or doesn't make sense for their platform, and then you're like, oh, I can't believe they didn't recognize the brilliance of my idea, and it's like, what were they going to do with it? I'm not saying that idea is bad. It might be brilliant, but that might not make sense on, Disney Plus. And like, why are you yelling at these suits for not understanding it? It's sort of like, try to figure out something that satisfies their needs. So, but like, you're not there to please them. You're just like, oh, okay, you're getting what you need. I'm here doing what I want. it just happens to overlap with what you need. And if you can find that happy medium, I think you can be happier.
Yeah. I think it's something similar about what people have been saying about finding the right place for your project. It's like pitching to Netflix is super different from like what you said, pitching to Disney Plus. And sometimes your story may not fly because of like the audience and like sometimes the values and everything like that. Yeah. But
and then also the timing too. And that's why the other thing about not being precious with it isn't just like, oh, I don't care if no one picks it up or something. It's more like, you know what, it didn't go right now, but that doesn't mean it's dead. If you read stories and, Hollywood Reporter and Variety and stuff, like there, like sometimes you'll see a movie or a series that you love and it's like, this thing, the director or the writer or the creator started it 15 years ago and it almost went, and then it went into turnaround, and then it might have just sat on the shelf for 10 years, and then the right opportunity, the right person came up. I can't tell you how many times a couple of my friends I have a number of friends that have stuff in development. Some of these things have gone on for years, but they're like, oh yeah, I pitched it and they said no. And again, I think the typical thing is that someone goes home and they're just heartbroken. They're either angry or they're like, oh, I suck or whatever, or they doubt the project or whatever. And then what'll happen is they'll get a call 2 years later and the exec who said no is like, hey, I'm not at that studio anymore.
Right. Yeah.
I loved your project. I just couldn't get it greenlit. Like my bosses didn't want something like that at that time. It's not about your project being good or bad or whatever. It's just like, it just wasn't that whole running the gauntlet thing. But a number of my friends have had situations where the exec's like, I love your project. Actually, a friend of mine just told me, we just did a Zoom hangout on Thursday. He just told me this, like, and it's like they're at another place or they're in another position or they have a new boss. And they're like, I've always loved your project. I've been thinking about it for 2 years. And you're like, what? I thought no one cared about it, and so that's the other idea is like, love it, but don't, the other thing is, and I can tell you, like with my graphic novels, which are like long delayed and because all this animation stuff keeps coming up, sometimes you get a better perspective on your project when you get some time away from it. And you might come back, like with my books, like, I'm glad I didn't get them done on time. It's like, they're going to be so much better now. I'm going to be so much happier with them. And I've got a better understanding of the world and the story and the characters than I did a couple of years ago because I got to step away from it. And that might be the case with a show that you develop and pitch. It might not be the right time. It might not be the right place. Like you're saying, Carrie, like you might have pitched it and it almost went, or you were even in development, or you maybe even made a pilot and it just didn't go. But then it might find a better home. And then you'll look back. Again, it's that Zen attitude of like, don't always think of something as good or bad. Just think, okay, this happened, there's good and bad and everything. And like, what seems bad now might be turn into something good later. So
yeah. Then actually on this like topic of like discernment, like detaching yourself from your project but putting like doing your best and everything, when did you find, like when you learned that about yourself, like when you learn I should do this rather than putting my whole self into the project, putting my whole self-worth and then getting disappointed? Like was it like a hard lesson? It
was really watching these other people who were further down that process. I hadn't pitched yet, and I was seeing how it affected them and how they had kind of approached it. And again, I'm not saying they were like foolish or something. I was just trying to learn from these people that were a little older than me and were further down the road. And I was just trying to pay attention. And the other thing I noticed with different colleagues of mine at that time, they were like, wow, just need that $1 million idea. If I just had that awesome idea, then everything kind of like, oh, you have the idea and then everything else just falls into place. And I remember thinking like, I don't think that's true. Like, you know, even though I was like pretty young, I was like, I think you gotta like work it like it's a job. And so that's what I did. When Zim just unceremoniously ended, it just one day it was over. I was the art director at that time, so I got to stay on a little longer because I had to finish up a bunch of like design stuff. But the moment I heard the show got canceled, I closed my office door and I was just called my parents. I was like, hey, yeah, my job is ending, but I'm not going to look for another job. I'm going to work on an idea full time. And I had some money saved up, and they were like, you know, my dad was like, that's a good idea. He's like, you're young, you don't have any kids, you don't own anything. Take a risk, you know, invest in yourself. And everybody's got different situations. Not everybody can do that. But what I did was when Zim ended, when I left there, the following Monday, I started working on Avatar with Mike every day, minimum 8 hours a day, like it was a job for months. And I just treated it like my job, but I was spending my own money, you know, that I had saved up from working on Zim and stuff. So it's not just a $1 million idea. And then here's the other thing. The idea is like 2% of it. Then you have to execute it. And that's the hard part. Coming up with ideas is, you know, it can be challenging, but that's the fun part. That's the easy part, you know. Everything else is making it and communicating it, presenting it. And that's the work.
That's a good segue, Bryan, too. And I wanted to ask, I thought it'd be fun to like, all right, everybody, take us back, Bryan. Like, it's the day before the pitch, right? You've prepped it. You've been working with Mike on this idea. It's the day before the pitch. And what is going through your mind? Like, how do you prep for that like big day? And we talked about like it not being, you're invested for sure. You're going to pitch your heart out, but at the same time, you're ready for anything. So the day before you pitch Avatar, what are you guys feeling? What do you think?
Well, I'm going to answer that, but I've got a bunch of other stuff I want to say before that, but don't let me forget.
Okay.
Because again, the other thing, you know, my first preamble that like, this is everything you're going to hear is just my opinion. And I want everyone who's watching today to keep that in mind. This is just one person's point of view. And just because I've had 2 shows made and have, you know, I'm co-running a studio now, doesn't mean what I say is like, if I do what Bryan said, it'll work out. You know, you might like go in with Bryan's handbook on pitching and some Amazon executives like, what the hell are you doing? You know, like, where did you learn this crap? Who told you this is a good idea? You know, and the spoiler, the ending of that story is you gotta pitch and present yourself in a way that's authentic to yourself. Don't listen to, I mean, you know, you can see the advice that's in Hollywood books and stuff, but you just be authentic and just pitch the way you want to pitch and what's right for your project and what's right for your personality. Don't listen to all this rules and stuff. So some of you may have heard, you know, Mike and I have told this story a bunch of times over the years, but so the conventional wisdom in Hollywood is the 7-minute pitch, or there's the elevator pitch, and you know, you should be able to pitch your whole thing in 7 minutes and all this. The Avatar pitch, I talked for 2.5 hours. 2.5 hours straight. Eric Coleman interjected a few times. Otherwise, I just talked for 2.5 hours. And that was the first time I ever pitched. And I'm still working on this damn show, you know, like 20 years later. So I did everything wrong. I didn't do it any sort of conventional way, and it worked. But the point is, I just pitched what was authentic to me, and and Mike into that project. And but the other thing, the other preamble I want to get into is, and this is not what anyone on this webinar wants to hear, but the first step to pitching is work in the industry for a couple years minimum. Like and I'm not saying, oh, you got to pay your dues, blah 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 blah. This is in your own interest. You do not want to be coming straight out of school, or to be, however you're learning art, you know, you're learning on YouTube, or you're taking web classes, or you're going to an art school, or you're going to a university that has an art program, or whatever you're doing, but you've never worked in the animation industry. You do not want to have a show greenlit. I'm telling you, you do not. And the little like analogy or whatever I always give is, it's like someone gives you a Maserati and you don't even have your learner's permit. You are going to wrap that Maserati around a telephone pole, okay? You do not want to have a show before you understand how shows are made. And again, I think a lot of people have this idea that being a showrunner is just, you know, you're just sitting like with your coffee and you're just like, I had an idea and I want everyone to, you know, like execute my idea. And you're just like, that's not making a show. And again, I just really paid attention in the early days of my career. I looked around, like I talked about watching those other, you know, colleagues of mine. I went to RISD, Seth MacFarlane. I graduated, or I transferred in right when he graduated, so I didn't know him at school, but Mike and my buddies were friends with him. So I knew who he was. I saw his student films and stuff at RISD. And by the time I graduated, Family Guy had been picked up and Mike was directing on it. So, oh, nice Nickelodeon mug. So I got to know him a little bit when I first got out to LA. I was 22 and I got a job on Family Guy. And so I saw what show running was. I mean, I wasn't like super close with Seth and I wasn't like hanging out with him in the office. He was in a different building, but I was close enough. I had enough of a proximity to know that it was brutal. Like he was being pulled in a million directions. He was working crazy hours and I could see that it was not like some luxurious, cushy type thing. And then I worked on Zim and I actually got to know Jonan quite well, and we were in the same building. And for the first few months, I didn't really, we were friendly, but I didn't really chat with him. But in the later months, I think like the second year on the show, I got to know him much better. And I could just see like, oh, this is not, show running is brutal. It is brutal, especially if you care. If you care about your show and you're trying to elevate the craft, it is like being in an Iron Man or like running a enduro race. Like it's like 100-mile race across a Peruvian desert, in 100-degree weather. Like show running is brutal. The new way I keep describing it is it's like professional fighting for nerds. It's like the nerd equivalent of fighting. And by that I mean, look, you might love martial arts, you might love sparring and training and even competing, but it's a very different thing to like strap on 4-ounce gloves and like get into an octagon and beat two people beating the crap out of each other. Like you lose some of yourself, you leave some of yourself in that ring, you take damage, it takes years off your life. You come out the other end, you're fried, you're burnt out, and yeah, you might have advanced your career and you might have gained some fame or whatever, but you left something of yourself. You left some pieces of yourself in there. And that's why, like, and that's not for everybody. That is not, again, I don't want people to think that like having a show is the be all end all of success or something. It's not. It's a brutal death match. And, you know, I'm being hyperbolic, but again, the nerdy version of that, you know, and there are so many other ways to have a fulfilling career, making art, working on awesome crews with people. So my point is, you don't want to do that before you're ready. You just showed up for a Taibo class and someone's like, you're going to fight in the UFC on the main card. Like, why would you want to do that? You might want some years to gain some experience, to spar, to maybe do an amateur fight before you're like in the big leagues, you know? And it is so much better to work on a show where you have a responsibility and you're working really hard, but the weight of that entire production, the daily problems that go on, the problem solving, the decision making, dealing with a network, dealing with animation studios, trying to run a big crew trying to train people, trying to communicate your ideas to people, trying to get all your work done on time when your days are split up into meetings every hour. And at 7 p.m. when everybody goes home, that's when you start doing the work that you have to do, or you come in on the weekends just because it's quiet and you can actually get work done without people asking you questions every 5 minutes. It is so much better to work on a show and gain an understanding of how that show runs before the weight of it is on your shoulders. And so again, I don't want people to misconstrue that. I'm like, don't pitch a show when you're 22 because you got to pay your dues and you don't deserve it yet. It's not about deserving it. It's about equipping yourself with the experience to run it well once you get there. Because, and let me tell you, you learn more from working on shows that are not going well than you do from shows that are going well. Because think about it, like if you have a car that runs perfectly, you're like, I don't know, I just put gas in it and occasionally I get an oil change and I don't know how cars work, you know, like I've never opened the hood, the thing works perfectly. You're not going to know anything about cars. That's fine for getting, you know, from point A to point B, but if you have a car that breaks down all the time, you're like, oh, it's Cadillac, the converter and this, you know how cars run because you're constantly having to deal with this thing.
Oh, wow.
So why be handed this very public opportunity where a bunch of money and a bunch of jobs and all of these things are riding on you, advertising dollars and stocks and all this stuff? Why do that before you even understand how a show is run? And if you work on a show that's kind of a nightmare or runs into a bunch of problems, you start to see, I don't think this show is set up right. Or like, I don't know if they're doing this in the most efficient way, or is this really gonna yield the best artistic results? Are we utilizing these artists the right way? Are these model sheets really set up the right way? Are our storyboards clear? Are our animatics presented in the right way? You know, are we putting them in the right format? Are we putting enough poses in there? Are these scripts getting funnier or are they getting worse with each revision? Are these stories better when they're premises than they are when they're scripts? Are they better when they're scripts than they are when they become animatics? All of this stuff is so much better when you're just like, hey, I'm just doing my job, you know, and it's sort of like, you know, like there's just shrapnel flying and you're like, I draw the storyboards, or I do the character designs, or I color the characters and props. Like, instead of like, I just graduated from Sheridan and I'm the best artist ever and I have this really cool idea, and some networks like, oh my gosh, look at this artist, she's amazing, and look at her idea is brilliant, and this is the $1 million idea. Give her a show. And then here's what's going to happen. They're going to say, but you have no experience. We can't in good conscience ride millions of dollars on you. We're going to pair you with someone who's a lot more experienced, but it's someone who's never had their own show. And so you're going to probably get this kind of bitter, blowhard older person, you know, my age, who's like bitter that they've never had a show, but they have all the experience in the world. And they're like, look, kid, I know, you know, that seemed cool. And but let me tell you how it's done. And then you're going to have less ability to control and execute your idea. And you're going to be fighting with someone else. And you're also just not going to know. You're going to be like, you know, the producer sits you down and is like, hey, this happened. And you're like, why? I don't know. Like, I didn't know that was going to happen. And I don't know how to get us out of the situation. Because you've never run into those situations before. You've never seen them.
Are you the kind of person did you ever feel like you always had to have all those answers for the production side? Or did you delegate a little bit, like, I don't know, guys, can we talk about it? Or do you remember being thrown into the thick of things as a showrunner and how you adjusted?
Don't get me wrong. You like, look, the first series was really challenging and we faced a lot of problems. Every show, you could make the most simple preschool show and it's going to be a nightmare. Especially first season of a show is really hard. You look around and you go, hasn't anyone done this before? Like, it feels like no one's ever made animation when you're on a first season show. You're just like, what's going on, you know? And even though Mike and I had gone through that years, made 61 episodes and learned a ton, when we came back to do Korra, we knew a lot more. We were older, wiser, battle tested, you know, and we made a lot better decisions about things and set things up differently and hired differently. And we faced problems that we had never even heard of. You know, like there were curveballs that we were like, what? I thought we had seen everything, you know? So I don't want to give the impression that like, you work in the industry a couple of years, you're going to know every single thing that's going to come at you. But I will say you'll be better equipped. You'll be better equipped to problem solve. And no, I don't have all the answers. But you know, Mike and I put our heads together. We also work with great producers that help and great studio heads that help problem solve. There's always going to be problems. Any production, live action, animated, any genre, there are always going to be problems. But so anyways, that's my first preamble. It is in your interest to work in the industry. Bryan's pamphlet on pitching, number one, get in the industry and work for a couple of years. You will thank yourself later. So that's the first kind of preamble. The second one is let's get deeper into that idea about who you're pitching to. The probably most important meeting was not the pitch. It was a meeting I had before the pitch. I found out Eric Coleman and I were on Zim, and we were both on Zim. He was an exec. I was an artist on the show. I was kind of between factions. It was a very chaotic production, tons of incredibly talented people and really hardworking and really fun, creative, but also really hard and chaotic production. And I learned a lot on that show, a lot. And I gained a lot of confidence because I kind of saw how that was like me. Oh, I think I see how a show goes from like premise to post, you know, even though I wasn't a part of every process, I was paying attention. So I was sort of I wasn't really part of either clique. I was kind of in the middle, and there were a lot of contentious feelings flying around. And then Eric Coleman was an exec, so he was like the enemy. But he and I got along. We were kind of like, you know, the odd men out, but we were like, hey, you're cool. And I didn't know he was the head of development. I just knew he was like the EIC, the exec in charge on the show. And he was like, I found out that when the show was still going on, that he was interested in recruiting me to pitch, which is really cool. Because Eric he's an awesome exec who's interested in people, not the $1 million idea. He's like, the idea will come. I want to work with people that know how to run a show.
Oh man, I love that.
Yeah, and if you get creative people who are collaborative, he's like, the ideas will come. You know, again, not being too precious. So I don't know what prompted me to do this, but when Zim ended, and I was like, okay, now it's time. I'm going to work on my own idea, whatever. And I didn't know what that was. We didn't have Avatar yet. Mike and I had been developing this other project. So that's what I was focusing on. But we hadn't pitched it or anything. And I was like, all right, I reached out to Eric. I said, hey, you know, I heard maybe you were interested in talking to me. Let's get lunch. So instead of, I want to pitch, and it's all about the idea and the presentation, and it was like, let's just go get lunch. You know, I knew him a little bit from work, but we weren't like buddies or anything, you know, and I wasn't going to get lunch with him to be buddies. It was just to get to know him. And we had this amazing meeting where we didn't talk about any specific pitches, any ideas or whatever, but it was still a very creative, cool meeting where he was just talking about the kind of shows he wanted to make. You know, like, he's like, I want to make a show with heart. I want to make a show that's really sincere and earnest and has high stakes and isn't just a spoof of something, or isn't just the cartoon version of something, you know, and I wanted that too. That's what, working on sitcom shows, and Zim was great and fun and evil and, you know, and funny, but like, it wasn't like full of heart, you know, and I loved working on it, but I wanted to work on something that was a little closer to my artistic voice and really sincere and earnest, you know. And so we just talked about kind of that big picture philosophical stuff. But then the lunch went so well that Eric's like, you know, I got to get back to a meeting, but why don't you come back at the end of the day and we'll keep talking. And so I came back met him at the studio, and that's when he sat me down and said, okay, here's what we're looking for right now. He's like, look, I have mandates. I have orders from above, what we're looking for. And at that time, in the spring of 2002, they were looking for something like Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings. And they were separately, they were, because those were the two biggest things in the world at that time. And so everybody wanted fantasy, legends and lore. And then separately, another mandate they had was action adventure, but without violence, because they were trying to compete with some Saturday morning block of cartoons on some other network that had a bunch of boy viewers. And Nickelodeon was very much kind of 50-50 with their viewership. And they were like, you know, the suits were like, we want to get into more of the boy market, or, you know, whatever. So that's the Venn diagram. That's half of the Venn diagram. That's the corporate, like, they have their needs. And they had some other things. Well, and then Eric goes, well, let me tell you what we're not looking for. And he described it, and it was exactly what we had. And I was just, and so I was on cloud nine, because here I was really connecting with this executive, and he was interested in me and was recruiting me. And he's like, and I just deflated. I was like sitting on his, like, you know, Nickelodeon cartoony couch, and I was just like, Mike and I had been working on this project since, this was like, I don't know, this conversation was probably March or something, and we had been working on this thing since November, and I was like, this is the greatest idea. Oh, this is gonna be so awesome. And Eric described not the, like, you know, the actual pitch, but just like the all the check boxes. I was like, that's what we have, and that's what I thought would work for Nick. That's not what they were looking for at that time. But Eric being Eric and being awesome, he's like, look, here's the deal. I want to work with you. You're not going to hear this a lot in Hollywood, but still, I think there's something to be learned from it. He's like, I want to work with you. You're going to come pitch something to me. And if I say no, don't walk out of here with your tail between your legs. Don't be crestfallen. He goes, I could be saying no for any number of reasons that have nothing to do with how good your project is. It's just, I have to meet these needs for the network, you know, and I'm trying to do my best to find good quality stuff that meets those needs. So don't get discouraged if I say no. So that's the lesson, I think, is, again, if you pitch to anyone, even someone you don't have a relationship with, like I did with Eric, is to just don't take those no's like daggers to the heart. Just be like, you know what, whatever, it didn't work out for them at this moment, you know? And maybe they'll give you some good feedback that can help you. If they're a good development exec, you know, and they're generous and honest. And they might say, I love it, we just can't make this right now. Or you'll hear this one the most, we have something else like it. And it might not be, you might be like, that show's crap, you know, but it's like, yeah, but it has a robot and a red balloon or whatever, you know, it's just, it's like, oh, it's similar enough, and I can't have two things like that in development at the same time. So Eric was like, don't get discouraged. He goes, just keep coming back and keep pitching till we get something made. And that was just so encouraging to hear. And I knew enough that you don't hear that a lot in Hollywood. And I was like, okay. So I was like, and he goes, also, don't feel like your pitch, this is one of the most important things I think I'm going to say today. Don't feel like your pitch has to be totally slick and all worked out, and you've worked out everything about the world building and every single character and all of their backstories and all of the art is pixel perfect, and you've put it all on these amazing foam core, you know, displays, or you have this fancy PowerPoint, or you have some whole script, and like you and your partner are like setting each other up for these like scripted jokes and like props, and, you know, look, if you want to do all that, more power to you, but you don't have to. There's no rule. And in fact, a lot of development execs would like to see it when it's not so fully baked, because they might be able to help shape it to better fit their network. And you got to get over yourselves, artists. They might help you make it better, because Eric helped us make our show better, as did a bunch of the writers that we worked with, you know. You can't be, you've got to, again, protect the core idea, but understand that it's going to evolve, and it hopefully will get better, you know. And you've got to have faith in yourself and in other people's perspectives that it will. And so I was like, so actually I got a little deflated, and then I was like, you know what, he's right, like whatever, you know. And I said, you know what, Eric, we'll come back in a month and we'll pitch. And we didn't have anything. So I set a pitch meeting, and we didn't even have anything. So Bobby, you asked, like, you know, blah, 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 and I didn't have anything, because I just had to throw out the thing I'd been working on for 6 months, you know?
Oh boy.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But I had his list of mandates, and he had given, you know, and then we had this whole conversation about the type of show, just like the spirit of it, you know? So I went back and I told Mike this whole thing, because Mike was working full time and hadn't met Eric yet. He hadn't worked at Nickelodeon at this time. And so I was like, shared all of that, downloaded all that to Mike, and I was like, what do we got? And we pulled out, this is the second most important thing I'm going to say. The third, because the most important thing is work in the industry first. Save every scrap of paper. Save every sketch you do, no matter how bad you think it is. No matter if you're like, this is random, I don't even know what this is. Just save it. Just throw it in a pile. Back it up on a hard drive. Put it on the cloud. You know, you don't have to share it all on Instagram or DeviantArt or whatever. Just save it. Any story ideas, any character ideas, any premise ideas, world building, just save them somewhere. I promise, if you're like me, you'll forget you ever did it. And you'll find it one day when you're cleaning or moving, and you'll go, and you'll sit down and read it, and you'll go, where the hell did I come up with this idea? Like, I don't even remember doing this, you know? The drawing that led to Avatar. Mike and I threw literally a bunch of stuff on his kitchen table. Just sketches and ideas. And we had stuff all over the map. Little comedy shows, little animals. We had all sorts of stuff. And I just had this drawing that was, I barely remember doing it, but I drew it in the middle of the night on Zim. I drew it at like 2 or 3 in the morning at the end of a long day. And I was really inspired by Cowboy Bebop. And I drew this kind of weird like ragtag. I was thinking of them like a space crew. And it was this like 40-year-old like dude who was like kind of balding. And he was like in a space suit. And then he had a little cyborg robot monkey thing that, it was like a little monkey, but it had one eye, like kind of a lens eye. And then he had this bipedal polar bear dog. And I think he had the arrow on his head, or the little robot did or something. And he was wearing a sort of like, kind of like Chewbacca, sort of a bandolier or something, you know, but like a little more like, kind of like a fanny pack, but like a shoulder fanny pack.
Yeah.
And he was just like standing there. And I just thought, I don't know, there's some loser, weird space crew, you know. I barely remember doing it. And I found that drawing and I was like, that's kind of cool. And when I came home from that meeting from Eric, I remembered some advice he gave me. It was like, have a kid POV, like have some way that they can get into the story. Don't come pitch a story about a tax attorney, some middle-aged tax attorney to Nickelodeon, you know? And by the way, he's like, I get pitches like that all the time. So you might think that's obvious, but it's not to some people. And I just redid the drawing, and I made the guy, the 40-some-year-old dude, a kid, but I kept him bald. And I put the arrow on his head, and then I like redrew those characters. And I gave the kid like a staff, this like tech kind of sci-fi staff. And I was like, I don't know who this kid is, but he's cool. Like, I like him, you know? And that was Aang. Aang was born before we knew anything about Aang. And then I just started, so we had a month, and these 2 weeks, I just started drawing this kid. I didn't know what he was about, but I was like, he's kind of a shepherd. He's got like this staff, and he's like, I drew him like floating on the bison, you know, this 6-legged bison. So I was just super inspired by Miyazaki. And when I was a kid, I always loved drawing hybrid animals. And it was kind of the first time since I was a kid, I just drew for myself, not for an assignment, for school, not for my job. I was just drawing for me. I know a lot of people, like I'm not one of these saintly artists that just like get home from work and they draw all day. Like I'll play guitar or do something else, you know? And like, I rarely would just draw for me. But I tapped into this like little kid spirit that I used to have. And I was just like, I don't know, I'm just drawing. I'm just exploring this world without having to have some specific idea. And so I just started drawing this kid, and he was like sort of shepherding these beasts through the air. And I had him, he's like standing on a cloud. I didn't know how he could stand on a cloud. I was like, I don't know, he's an air kid. He's like this air shepherd.
Sure. Yeah.
You know, and then Mike had some ideas about these kids in the South Pole being trapped. And one day at yoga, I just was like, wait, the air kid. And then those kids in the South Pole are these water kids. And then there are these fire people trying to melt the South Pole, but all the parents are gone. And I like had this super intense download literally in the first post. So I was like, and there were like 90 minutes to go, and I was like, I gotta get out of this class. I gotta go tell Mike. And we didn't have cell phones back then, so like I just drove to his house at night, showed up like sweat. I was doing Bikram yoga, so I was like totally drenched in sweat, like wearing like a tank top and little like, you know, running shorts. And I was like, Mike's like, hey. I was like, hey. So back in the early 2000s, you used to just show up at your friend's house without calling or texting. I know it's weird. And they didn't shoot you or call the police. You would just be like, hey, come on in. And so I just sat down in his living room and I just pitched him this random idea. But Mike like, oh yeah, and then there's Earth people. And then we just started going, and we developed Avatar for 2 weeks before we pitched it. 2 weeks. And I remember Eric going in that meeting, that pre-meeting, that was like so fateful. He was like, I want magic. I want action. I want adventure. And so I did 3 illustrations in color. And I did one of Aang in the Avatar state with all this fire around him. And in the pitch, I just laid it down and I said, magic. And then I had Aang on his glider swooping down on this ironclad Fire Nation ship as all these like, you know, Macross kind of rocket firebending blasts were like coming at him and he's swooping through it. And I was like, action. And then I had Aang shepherding the bison. There used to be more bison. And Katara and Sokka were way behind him on another bison. And he was just looking all happy, you know, this happy-go-lucky shepherd kid. And they were way above this like, I had taken a photo out the window of Greenland as I flew over it. And I kind of like painted on top of it. And I said adventure. And they were just loose leaf. I just like printed them on, you know, I like got an Epson color printer and just printed them. Then I had 45 black and white pencil sketches. I think I just brought the original sketches, loose leaf. Here's my other big piece of advice. The thing about doing a really slick presentation where it's all like you're controlling it is that they tune out. Like executives kind of, because they're taking in a lot of information, you know, and you gotta keep in mind like this world exists in your head, but it's not in anyone else's head yet. They don't understand the tone, the vibe, the aesthetic, the humor, the scope. That's all in your head. Mm-hmm. So what I like to do is, you know, you can try to communicate it verbally, and they're gonna get like, it's kind of like a black hole, like eating a bunch of matter. Like even though it's like devouring, it like spits a bunch of it out. Like it can't eat all of it at once. So like not everything you're saying is gonna sink in. So what I always advise people to do, just have like stuff for them. And I'm telling you, even if they're super interested, they'll just kind of start like, I don't know what this person's talking about. They'll just pick up the art, and then maybe they'll get some of what you're saying, but they're like looking at the stuff. But like keep it loose leaf. Let them pick up things they're interested in. If you're only like, next slide, they're like sort of like, I'm back in school and I'm at a TED talk and I wish this person would shut up. You know?
Oh no.
So I really, and again, it doesn't need to be slick. Like the art that you're showing, it's not like, oh, I have to absolutely figure out this design or this character is in the show. I had a bunch of stuff that never even made it in the show, but it gave the like feeling of the world. And that's more important at this stage of like, oh, what is this world like? What does it feel like? What is it? And I just had like the animals and Aang riding, you know, the bipolar or the bipedal, not bipolar, sorry. The bipedal polar bear. He could be a bipolar bipedal polar bear. Try saying that fast. That animal didn't even make it in until the Legend of Korra, like years later. I had a scene of Aang meditating in an ice cave that I'm still sad that we didn't get into the show, where he was like meditating and he was levitating, and Katara was like peering in the ice cave, seeing him. That scene never even made it in the show, but it gave you the feeling of the show, you know? And so, and I talked as, now it probably doesn't seem surprising now that you all have heard me ramble for an hour.
No,
I talked for 2.5 hours, but I was like getting really deep and really passionate. And so you were saying like, was I nervous or this or that? This is my advice to answer your earlier question. I always tell people, do not pitch like you're pitching to a bunch of executives. Pitch like you are pitching to your roommate the night before the pitch. Okay? If you think of it as I'm pitching to an executive at Netflix or whatever, you're gonna, oh no, I said the wrong thing, or that joke didn't land, or and you're going to start freaking out. If it's your friend, you pitch differently. And so if you're telling your friend a story, you'll go, oh, wait, I forgot to tell you this part.
Yeah.
And you'll back up.
Yeah.
Oh, you know, blah, 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 blah. Okay, anyways. And then you'll move on. If you're pitching to an executive, you're like, oh my God, I forgot to tell them that part. And then you're like, I've gone off script and the whole thing falls apart and blah, 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 blah. So my other thing, and this is just like everything else I'm saying today, my opinion, my personality, my tastes. I cannot stand listening to people do a pre-scripted pitch. It drives me crazy. It feels so fake to me. And I just feel like I feel like I'm in like, no offense to anyone who's in theater, I feel like I'm in like a community theater. And you ever like go to see your friends play and you're like stuck in the front row and it's so small and you're like 3 feet away from the lead actor and they're delivering a soliloquy and you're like right in front of them and I'm grinding my teeth, I'm sweating, I have my arms folded, and I'm just like, I'm so uncomfortable right now, you know. My advice, don't do that. Just come in there and just talk about it. It doesn't need to be a script. It doesn't need to be a presentation. Just come and then be genuinely enthusiastic. That's not like, oh yeah, like I set up that joke and then my partner like had to pit the punchline and we were like, yeah. Like if your show's a musical and you're really good at singing, you know, and you want to bust out into song, like that could be cool. But if you just do it authentically, not like you're making them think that they're like, they bought tickets, you know, to some stage show or something. But if that's like what's real for you and your project, like go for it. Just do it organically. And like, just give them a feeling of it. You don't have to explain everything. You just want them to go, I want to know more about that. I really liked that person. I loved the way they described this. And I loved the vibe of the artwork and the humor that they described. And like, that's so much more valuable than the $1 million idea, you know? Because like, you could take your favorite show or movie or whatever, and you could stage a bad version of the pitch and a good version of the pitch, and the idea is the same. So it's not all about that idea; it's about how you communicate it. You know. So does that answer your question?
No, that's amazing. Like I think we're all. I mean, like learning so much, and there's a lot of things I need to, like take into consideration as well of like the pitch and everything else. But Bryan, thank you so much, man. I appreciate it. We're gonna get into, if you don't mind, Bryan, a little bit into the Q&A stuff.
Cool.
And so we're gonna bring people on, and we're gonna kick it off with Kira, who was 10 years old when Avatar kind of premiered, and so she grew up with it. And she wanted to ask you a few questions. So I'm gonna bring a few people on. For like.
Yeah. Okay. So before I start my question, I just want to give everyone a heads up. If you are selected for a question, please do keep your question to one, so that like we have more time for more people to ask. And let's also focus our questions on the topic of this webinar, which is pitching. Just so we will be staying on topic. So with that, right, on behalf of the audience, I really want to thank you, Bryan, for making yourself available and spending the time with us today. And it's like really, like what Bobby said, it's super surreal for me to be here, because like growing up, Avatar was something that I consumed as a kid, and it's really a show that allowed me to explore the world of animation as well. So on that note, given the fact that it's been around 17 years ago since the series was conceptualized, pitched, and aired, has there anything?
19.
Has there been anything? 19?
Yeah, we came up with it in 2002.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Okay, my bad. But
no,
anything?
You were a little child. How would you know?
I was an infant.
Yeah.
Okay. But yeah. Has there been anything that changed in terms of the pitching process from then to now? And if anything has, what has caused that change? Like, is it culture, demographic, and what do you think will change in like the next few years to come for those who are interested in pitching their shows?
Well, thank you for all this kind words. Yeah, I think the thing that I think has changed is that what I said earlier, there are far more outlets for animation now than there were 19 years ago. Back in 2002, Nickelodeon was still the #1 cable network in the United States and had been for something like 20 years. I don't know, something like that. And the landscape has obviously changed a lot. Streaming did not exist back then. Netflix, if it existed, it was a place that sent you DVDs in the mail, you know. The world has changed a lot, and it's still changing. And all of these big media titans they're trying to figure it out. They don't even know what's coming up. They don't, you know, the streamers have only just begun, and none of them know the future. But I will say there are a lot more avenues for stuff. And you could actually, in this day and age, pitch a show that's super adult and is animated. Could be dealing with, and I don't just mean, oh, it's raunchy or whatever. Like, it could be dramatic. It could be a psychological thriller. It could be super political or social or something. Like, there aren't a ton of outlets for that, but I'm telling you, 20 years ago, there was zero. And now, you know, there's a chance to do that. Again, don't go pitch that to Nickelodeon. You know, go find the right outlet for that, and then don't go pitch your sweet, you know, cute show to, like, you know, HBO or something like that. You know, like, or I don't know, maybe they do preschool stuff. I have no idea, but just so that to me is what's changed. Other than that, based on everything I just said, I still think it stands. Just pitch in an authentic way. I don't think you need to change your idea to make some executive happy. If it's not making you happy and making the executive happy, you know, then it's no good. You know, I don't believe in just like, I really don't, because I just did a lecture for Nickelodeon Viacom with Mike, and we talked a lot about this. And I spoke to a class at RISD, a class about pitching. And I feel like I got a couple questions that were like, what would you know, how can you change it to make execs like it, or what ideas do they like? And I'm like, I think that's the wrong mentality. Why would you want to make a show that the exec likes that you don't like?
Yeah,
the exec should make that show, you know. And if they knew how, they wouldn't be taking pitches. That's another thing to keep in mind. You know, if they had the brilliant idea and they knew how to come up with this stuff, they wouldn't be taking pitches. But but keep everything else I said in mind, that you also have to understand that not just because it's you and authentic and a cool idea, it doesn't mean it's going to work for every place or every exec. You know, some of it might just be taste. They're just like, I don't really like it, you know, or I don't get it. It's probably more that they like, I don't get it. But the other thing is, like, the other idea that I didn't touch on about working in the industry first, it's not just, it's not about, hey, you got to pay your dues, kid. It's like, the more of a vetted person you are, the more of someone who has worked on productions and people are like, she's awesome. Like, I worked with her. She had a great attitude. She worked really hard. She collaborated really well with people. She had good ideas. She turned her work in on time. It was funny. You know, it was really good quality. And they're like, oh, and she has a really cool show idea. That's someone I am willing to take a risk on. That's someone I'm willing to invest in. If you're just like, I just got off the bus from, you know, the Midwest, which is fine. But like, I've never worked in animation. I actually don't even know how shows are made. And here's my brilliant idea. And they're like, that's a brilliant idea, but I don't even know who you are. No one in this industry knows who you are. It's not about, when you're on the outside, it can seem like a club or a mafia, and like, oh, they're all just looking out for each other. And look, there's some truth to that, but there's also this idea that, well, why? They don't know who you are. I mean, you haven't proven yourself in this industry. You haven't shown that, and not everybody can do the job. Not everybody can perform, and not everyone understands how this works. So that's another part of it. So it's more like, it's less about, I haven't pitched a ton, you know, like I pitched and then made a show, and then I kind of didn't really have, we pitched after that, and we a little bit, and then like, so it's not like I'm out there like, let me tell you how the pitching culture's changed. Like, I don't know, like, who cares? Who cares? Just pitch your idea, you know, like just pitch what's authentic to your idea and you. That's my advice.
Okay.
So,
awesome.
yeah.
Thank you for
Trisha,
answering.
Thank you, Kira. Thanks for your question.
Trisha, are you here?
Hi, Trisha.
Hello.
Hi.
It is the man, the myth, and the legend himself. It is an honor to meet you, sir.
Good to meet you, Trisha.
Okay, so my question is very simple. So when you've got all your ideas together, you've figured out your world building and everything, how do you know when you're ready for pitching? And how do you know, like, what are the key signs that you know are going that show that you're ready to share your idea with a studio? What is that key moment where you're like, oh yeah, I'm ready to pitch this idea. This idea is ready for the studios to see. They're going to be blown away.
I think when you wake up one morning and you're like, I'm ready to have my hopes and dreams kicked in the face, you know, like, yeah, that sounds great. Like, no, I'm just kidding. I think it depends on your relationship with the exec you're going to pitch to. If they already know you, or if someone has vouched for you, and again, I really recommend reaching out to them and just like get a virtual coffee with them. You know, virtual coffee meetings are all the rage in this pandemic. Just get to know them. No pressure. There's no performance. You don't have to be the first conversation you have with them is you spilling your guts and your soul and putting your heart on your sleeve. It could just be like getting to know them and seeing what makes them tick and seeing the person behind the job title, you know. If it's someone you've worked with, then like I had worked with Eric, and he's like, I don't need it to be super slick. I don't need it to be really developed and fully baked, you know. If it's your manager or your agent or a friend got you a meeting at some huge studio and you don't know anyone there and you want to make a good impression, okay, sure. Maybe you want to have your idea a little more worked out, you know, like not like, oh, I don't know, I just came up with this, I thought I'd share it with you. So I don't think there is a hard and fast, like, again, I don't think there are any rules to pitching, and I don't think there is a moment where it's like, you are by an outside metric ready. The only metric will be yourself. I think when you feel ready to share it, do give yourself some leeway that you don't have to have it all worked out. And you don't have to like hide that, you know. You can just talk to the exec and be like, yeah, I don't know, I haven't totally worked that out yet, but here's the main idea. You know, like if you're comfortable and confident and you really believe in the core of the idea, that's okay, you know? And the other thing to keep in mind is, I mean, it's a hypothetical, but like, I could have done the same pitch for Avatar over at some other studio and it could have bombed. You know, but I pitched it to the right person at the right time, at the right studio. So some other exec might have been like, he just had all these loose leaf drawings and oh my gosh, how unprofessional. And he talked for so long. And whereas Eric Coleman was like, this is amazing. And he said at the end of the meeting, this is my number one project right now. Like, this is the one I'm going to push the hardest. Like, this is my priority. And so I don't think there's any hard and fast rule, but if you don't believe in it yet, maybe don't go share it. I think that's that internal compass. If you're kind of like, I don't even really know what this show's about. Probably not a good idea to share it yet. But if you're like, you know what, I know what it's about. I don't have all the details worked out, but I know what it's about. And I know that main character, or I know this world, then you might be ready, I think, you know? So, and also maybe we're never ready. You know, like maybe we're always a little bit like flying by the seat of our pants a little bit, you know? So.
Trisha,
but like
thank you so much.
Trisha, like I would love to hear you pitch someday, you know, like just come in like yourself.
Oh yeah.
And just do your thing, because ultimately you want a show that has like the soul of the creators in it, you know, and obviously leaves room for other people too, but like you want a show that's like made with heart and like and honesty, you know, and not like, this was trending with the 8 to 12 demo in these markets, and this was really popular on TikTok. So, you know, like, who cares about that crap, you know? Just be like, this is a show about what I love. I put it all into this thing, and here you go, you know, and I'm going to tell you why I love it, and I hope you love it too. That's my, like, in a nutshell advice, so.
Noted. Yeah, I'm definitely going to take notes from that.
Awesome. I look forward to seeing your show.
I salute you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Trisha. I salute you back.
Nehemiah, are you on the call?
Yes.
Hey,
can you hear me?
how's it going? Do you want to answer a question for Bryan?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm in
Hi.
Hi. Yeah, I'm in a shared space right now, so this will be quick.
No worries.
But I always have loved the story of how Adventure Time was pitched, with like Penn Ward bringing in a ukulele and just singing about it. So how unconventional animation, based on what you've said, is subjective, but how unconventional can a pitch get?
Again, I would say, do you mind muting your mic? Can you just mute, just so I could hear myself? Yeah, I haven't heard that particular anecdote, but yeah, like I was, you know, spitballing earlier, like if that's part of your thing, like music or that even just captures the spirit of it, go for it. I just wouldn't recommend doing something like that just to be gimmicky, just to like stand out. Oh, I'm gonna do something wacky. I'm gonna, you know, come in a full costume just to try to get their attention and make an impression. I'm not saying don't come in costume. If that's just you and you're like, this is how I want to do it, you know, I can't think of doing it any other way, then do it. But I, again, kind of like the scripted thing, how that personally makes me a little uncomfortable and feels disingenuous. I think if you're like, I don't know Penn Ward or Penn, but like, but I know people that have worked with him, and I know enough about him that hearing that anecdote, that just sounds legitimate. That sounds authentically him. That he's just like, this is me, you know, like this is me doing my thing, playing my ukulele. And then I'm like, I'm all for it. But if someone's like, I gotta make a splash, I'm gonna have lights and glitter is gonna explode, and then the person's like, what have you done to my office? You know, like that, I think it's not, you know, it's not worth it. So how unconventional? I think maybe review the HR guidelines of that company. Don't get yourself into any sort of like legal trouble. But other than that, it's all fair. It's all it's all good. So I hope that helps.
Thank you, Nehemiah.
Thank you.
Kaylee, do you want to come on and ask Bryan a question?
Hello, Bryan. Hello, Bobby.
Hi. Hi. Good to meet you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure to be a part of Rise Up Animation. It's been such a journey, and like being able to meet all these mentors and get a sight into the industry, I'm so grateful and so thankful. In fact, like since starting with Rise Up Animation, I've actually been able to get into the industry. So
Oh, that's awesome. That's really great.
yeah, thank you so much for everything that you do. Like your work and everything is definitely helping push us all in the right direction.
Thank you. That's awesome to hear.
So Bryan, my question is like, once you've successfully created a hugely well-known world like Avatar and Korra, what is the process like when third parties approach you for like adaptation rights, or when you work in partnership with other companies or other studios? How much power and say do you and Mike have? And is like the adaptation pitch something largely already decided upon, or is that in your control as well? And is the process different for like movies and comics and books and video games? And is it also different from like, now that you're starting Avatar Studios, it's coming from yourself and your main team with in partnership with Bryan?
Oh, with Mike, yeah. So we.
Oh, with Mike. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's all right. I get called Mike all the time. So that there's no one answer to that. I mean, I can tell you my specific situation, but I think it's more informative to say that depends on your project, how it is set up at a particular company, production, studio, network, whatever. I'll tell you what's typical though. So some things for everybody to know. Have you ever heard the phrase like, oh, they sold a show? Yeah, my friend sold a show, or he knows someone who sold a show, or she sold a show. I told you how great Eric Coleman is, and he's still a great friend of mine, and I love and respect him. I have argued with Eric Coleman over that phrase so many times. Every time I've heard him say that, I'm like, stop saying that. It's such a fallacy. There is no sale of a show. The only time a show sells is if it exists already, maybe as some other thing, a video game or like a published, like known video game or graphic novel maybe, or it's a web comic or something that already exists. It's already established IP. Then maybe there's a sale to get the rights of that IP. But by and large, whenever you hear someone say, oh yeah, they sold a show, there was no sale. All they did was sign it over. It's a Faustian deal. When Mike and I sold the show to Nickelodeon, we pitched it, they said, we want it. And they said, we get the rights. If you want to do it with us, if you want us to make it, we get the rights, 100% of the rights. And we were like, all right, because the alternative is we don't have this giant company that has millions of dollars to invest in making this project and has distribution and marketing and licensing and all sorts of stuff. We were just two dudes in our 20s, who had our names on a few credits, but other than that, we were nothing. I had enough money to like take some time off to develop a project, but I didn't have enough money to invest in, making a pilot or anything like that. I pulled in favors from friends and some people will say, yeah, well, they gave you a development budget. I mean, that's the sale. Half of our development budget went to our lawyer to negotiate the deal that might have only lasted a few months, because we had to negotiate a deal that would last years. But that show we might have made a series Bible, and then that was it. They might not have decided to make a pilot. They might not have decided to make 6 scripts, 13 episodes, 1 season, 3 seasons. It might have just ended. But they got the rights. And so Viacom International owns Avatar the Last Airbender. And it's not like some situation like, you hear about like, oh, they're my favorite band in the 70s. And they were like young and their management tricked them and they didn't know they weren't getting all this money or whatever. Like, we knew what we were doing. We were like, we're no one in this industry. This is what we have to make a show to make a name for ourselves. And then hopefully that will lead to other opportunities. So we knew we were handing over the rights to this thing. So that Viacom owns it. They get to decide what they're going to license it off to, what they're going to do with it. Mike and I don't we don't necessarily, especially back then, didn't have like power over that. Now they have a vested interest in you as a source of this thing, and they need you to execute it, you know. So generally the creators, they try to keep them around unless something goes bad between the creators and the studio. Now that said, we have a really good lawyer, and part of the reason we spent half of our deal, our development money on our lawyer, was because our lawyer was really good and fought for getting us the best deal we could at that stage in our careers. So it's not that we're completely cut out of the project, but we don't have control in that sense. And that was a reality, just like I've talked about all these other realities of working with big studios. That was a reality of the situation. But it's been frustrating, you know, when there were things that happened with it that we had no say or control over. What are you going to do? You just have to stomach it, you know. Now, say your show was sold, really. Say you made it as a video game or some other thing. And that way, when a company did buy it, maybe you actually retained a percentage of the rights, or you retained certain rights. You only sold the TV rights, but you didn't sell the video game rights or something like that. In that case, you'd have more control. My book series, for instance, the number one reasons I wanted to do it was just I want to make a book series, not because I'm trying to turn it into animation or something else. But should it get to that point, if I ever finish, I actually own all the rights except for the publishing. So that's one of the cool things about publishing. There's not as much money in it, but you generally retain the rights to those things. So I would have a lot more say in how those deals were set up. I could retain 100% of the control over that, or I could sell a stake, but keep a controlling stake. There's all sorts of ways to slice it. So, you know, diehard graphic novel, comics people, understandably and rightfully so, I think get pretty disappointed in people that just use that medium as a pitching tool for animation or live action. Here's the thing, graphic novels and comics are like picture books for executives, because executives are not always the most visual, imaginative people. And then you show them this picture book and they're like, oh, wow, yeah, it's like this, but on TV. So that's why that stuff happens. And that's why it's good when you pitch to have a bunch of like visuals for them to look at, because if you just tell it to them, they're like, huh? I went to business school. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. Is it like that show? You know, that's why you hear a lot. It's like Rugrats meets X-Men, you know, like that's shorthand for Hollywood executives who are like, I don't know how to picture anything you're telling me, you know? So you've got to help them, you know, in your pitch. So that's why graphic novels tend to, and now the new one is podcasts. That's the new pitching tool, the new like prototype for an animated or live action series. They're like, oh, I listened to it in my car, and I'm just imagining now that could be on screen or something. But say you had a podcast that got picked up, you might get to retain some of the rights, or some control, you know. Now, that's that situation. Typically, you're just going to have to sign the whole thing over, and you don't own it unless it goes into what's called turnaround, where they're like, hey, thanks for the memories. We're not going to make this. You know, we're going to shut it down. You get it back. But you got to look at your deal, because you don't always get it back, or you don't always get it back right away. Or often you get it back, you could go pitch it to another studio, but that studio, if they like it, they have to pay the other studio back for the money they invested in it. So all this is to say, get a good lawyer, get a good entertainment lawyer. Even if you're like a lawyer, like I could barely pay rent. It's like, get a lawyer. you got to have a good lawyer if you're going to do this kind of thing. And don't let the studio, like, you don't need a lawyer. Like, you need a lawyer. And it's worth spending all of your development money on a lawyer. Because I am 45 years old now. I was 25 when we came up with Avatar, okay? We have multiple deals for different projects and things, but I am still under the same contract from when I was 26 years old. So you got to have a good lawyer and get the best deal you can at that time, because you never know, you might pitch the next huge franchise that takes over the world, you know? So now to answer, I'll dip in a little bit to the second part of your question. Now that I'm on the other side of it, we're not taking open pitches for like animation stuff. Mike and I are developing stuff with people that stuff we came up with people we're hiring to help us. But there are a bunch of ancillary projects, you know, there's a lot of stuff in development, other mediums, you know, video games, publishing. So yeah, we do get pitches or we work with people on that. And then now I'm on the other side of it. Now I'm the development exec. Now I'm the one, but it's our world that we created. So we're like, that's not quite the right vibe, or that doesn't really capture the spirit of it, or, ooh, we like this idea, and we help them develop it and shape it to better fit the world. So yeah, I wish you the best of luck, Kaylee. Maybe one day you will be running a giant studio, not that our studio is giant, but you might be running some conglomerate and taking pitches, and you'll be the one making the deals. So I hope that helps. So that's some of the like nitty gritty business side of stuff, but it's important because people can get stuck in really bad deals, or they're like, oh, I got a show. Like, I'm going into development, and you get to make a pilot, and then you don't get the rights back, or they have the rights for like 5 years, or just some nasty deal where you don't really have control. So everybody, it's like, get a good entertainment lawyer, not just like, I got an auto collision lawyer down the street, he's my cousin. Like, get an entertainment lawyer. And this is all like super Hollywood stuff, but it's like, look, this is the deal. If I was gonna go, you know, play baseball, I would go get a sports, you know, like a sports lawyer, you know, like you got to get a lawyer for that industry. So you got to protect yourself as best you can, and you will not get everything you want, and you will you're dealing with these giant corporations, you know. You're this tiny artist versus this giant corporation, but they need you. They need the lifeblood of what you create. And if they didn't, there wouldn't need to be a panel with 393 people on it hearing about pitching, because they would be like, oh, I've got this executive, and or a computer just cranks out all of these ideas. Although there is a giant studio that does that. They will remain unnamed, but you could probably guess. So anyways.
Thank you, Kaylee. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
And
all right.
Go ahead, Kira.
Sorry, we're just gonna have one more question from Igor. So Igor, if you wanna unmute yourself and ask the question, please go ahead.
Igor, are you here?
Yeah, I'm here. Good afternoon.
Hi. Good to meet you.
It's nice. It's a pleasure to meet you too. I would just really like to ask, as I've seen from your show, the way you've been able to pull from multiple cultures and multiple ethnicities, I wanted to primarily ask, like, how did you guys manage to take upon those types of cultures and those types of religions, and how are you able to like properly include them in this world without like I guess appropriating or possibly offending said cultures?
Yeah, it's you know, it was something that we took very seriously. We were certainly aware of, and I know, you know, it is a valid read on it to say, you know, because look, Mike and I are two privileged white guys in the United States, and to say you're, you know, appropriating these other cultures. The flip side of it is that we were those people who were given a really amazing opportunity. We were given a platform to make a show, to create a world, and to highlight something. And I grew up, Lord of the Rings were probably my, you know, that was probably my favorite I was really into fantasy novels growing up, and that was probably my favorite trilogy in high school. And then later, when I was working in animation, I was really into the Harry Potter novels, and you know, the movies were starting to come out around that time. And so I was a big fan of that stuff. And I read so much like Anglo-centric fantasy growing up, you know, wizards and dragons and knights, castles, and all that stuff. And but once I got to, you know, my mid-20s and actually got the opportunity to create a show, and there was this just the entertainment landscape was dominated by that, Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter. I was just like, as a white guy, I was like, I am so sick of this stuff. I'm so sick of like Anglo-centric fantasy stuff. It's enough. We've got enough of it. We've had plenty of it. It's had so much screen time, you know. And I didn't want to do some, you know, Dances with Wolves, The Last Samurai, white savior, like Marco Polo, like the entry point for the audience will be the white guy, and he'll be seeing how exotic these worlds and cultures are. And, you know, I'm just like, no, just get the white guy out of there. You know, like I wanted to Mike and I wanted to make a show about all of this stuff that we loved. Was it ours to claim? No. And the thing about Avatar, there is no one person or two people who could claim every culture in the Avatar world. It is a very big, broad world. It just doesn't have like, it focuses on a chunk of our world as inspiration and doesn't focus on the other. You know, I still love Lord of the Rings and think Tolkien was, you know, brilliant. But it's like, it's man versus orcs and whatever. And then it's like, yeah, and then there are these like Middle Eastern people, they're on the side of the orcs, but it's man, you know, the white man, the kind of Euro man. And like, when I saw that on screen, not just like reading the novels as a kid, but like, I was like, oh God, that's not aging well. That's pretty bad, you know? And like, I was just like, let's set that aside. And look, what I'm about to say is not to say that it excuses what we did or, oh, well, they did it, so we can do it. But especially as a very ambitious and inspired 25-year-old person in animation, as I said at the beginning of this talk, I feel like I'm a citizen of the world, and artists are my people. You know, I feel more of a kinship with artists all over the world, and I think that doesn't preclude the validity of how horrible cultural appropriation is, and how rampant it is, and how horribly these things are done usually by the ruling, you know, kind of dominant culture. Just takes and distorts and steals and misinterprets and others, you know, that is all real. I'm not saying that. But when I looked at like Miyazaki, and when he made Kiki's or like Kiki's Delivery Service or Porco Rosso, this is a love letter to Europe. And it's not a real Europe. It is a fantasy Europe. It is the Europe of his imagination. But that said, it's not a caricature of Europe. He is expressing this love for it. And that's how I read it. And likewise, that you see that, you know, I mean, there's a real love between like Japan and France. There's this back and forth, like looking across the world and going, there are really amazing things about your culture, and I'm outside of it, but I love it, and I want to respect that and honor that. And so when we came up with this, it was like, there's enough of that stuff. There's enough of this Anglo-centric stuff. And again, I love it. I love a lot of that stuff. But I was like, I grew up, I mean, I don't just like, oh, Kung Fu movies, aren't those crazy? Like, it's so wacky with, no, I love them. I love them. Like, I grew up on that stuff. And that's like real to me. And I was one of those kids that's like, Hollywood doesn't know how to do it. Like, this is the real stuff. And, you know, people like, oh, Martin Scorsese winning, and, you know, Martin's great, but like, oh, he's got an Oscar for, oh, I'm blanking on the name. The one that, Andy Lau was in the original. And it was with Matt Damon, and was it Matt Damon? I'm completely blanking. I've been talking too long. I'm getting a brain fart.
Departed?
The Departed, yeah. Was it The Departed?
Mm-hmm.
Was that it?
I think.
The Infernal Affairs, I think, was the original film.
It's either The Departed or Shark's Tale, someone said.
No, The Departed, but the original was Infernal Affairs, and it's a Hong Kong film. And it is brilliant, and it is way better than the American, but like this whole American idea of like, oh, we'll take it and we'll put white actors with it and we'll put it in English and it'll be better and that'll make it legitimate. I didn't buy into that. I was like, that film is an incredible film. And the filmmaking, not just the story, but the filmmaking, the cinematography and the acting, the editing and the action is amazing. So, you know, what my advice is, like, when you come up with your show, don't try to like tick the boxes of what you think is popular or what you think an executive will like or what you think some network wants or something. Make it with what you genuinely love. And I was getting really deep into Eastern philosophy, not religions, philosophies, you know. I wasn't looking to put religions on the screen. But yes, these philosophies obviously did develop in religions. The culture, architecture, super into yoga. This was stuff I wasn't just like, oh, that's kind of neat and exotic, you know. I was like, I love this stuff. Is it mine? No, it's not mine. What is mine? Suburban white America? You know, that I didn't need. There's enough of that spread around the world. So we used our privilege to try to showcase something else. Did we do it perfectly? No, we didn't. Did we do our best? Yes, we tried and we learned, and, you know, we brought on a cultural consultant early on. And because Nickelodeon was concerned about it too, you know, rightfully so. And Mike and I were like, yeah, we want that supervision, but we wanted people we wanted consultants that were enriching the material, that were not just policing us. We wanted the policing, but we wanted to enrich it. And we're building that into Avatar Studios from the ground up, you know, working with cultural consultants. And we had goals with our original, the way we were casting, and it was a challenge, and we weren't able to achieve what we wanted to back then, and we didn't always, you know, do it as best as we all could have. And so we're approaching that differently now too. And now we actually have more support from the studio to do that, you know, and that's a whole other conversation. And I'm not saying it, I'm not throwing them under the bus, and I'm not trying to pat ourselves on the back, you know. We tried and we didn't always succeed, you know, and so it's something I take really seriously. And we worked with, I worked, again, really closely. I lived over in South Korea and worked with the animators and got to know them. And some of them are still I'm really close with them. And I wanted their input, and they gave their input. And I worked with, you know, there was an artist from China that worked on the first season, very early, first season of Avatar, Li Hong, and he pulled me aside and had a really serious talk with me about the way we were presenting something. And I was like, I didn't think of it that way. That is super helpful. And I went and had a meeting with Mike and our producers, and I said, we've got to redo a bunch of stuff in the design. And we did, and it put me behind schedule, and I never caught up. I was behind schedule for 4 years, but it was important. And he pulled me aside and he just was like, hey, look, I need to educate you on this, a different perspective. And I was like, you're absolutely right. And we're going to make that change, So when we were presented with that stuff, we took it really seriously, and we didn't just barge forward like, oh yeah, whatever. We were like, hey, I'm a guest here, and I'm trying to do my best. And I understand that just by the nature of us doing that, that's going to offend some people, and they're going to think we have no right. And they have every right to think that, and that's fine. I would love to believe in a world where, that adage, like, write what you know, and I think that came from Woody Allen, and who gives a pile of crap what that guy thinks. Write what you know. Yeah, look at what that guy wrote. Go watch Manhattan, and like, okay, whatever. I think if you write what you know, is really stale perspective. I think write with empathy. Try to write. If you write what you know, you're just writing yourself. It's just you.
Yeah.
And it's always your perspective, and it's always a character based on you, and everyone else is just like a reflection of yourself or something, And look, there's always going to be a bit of you in every character. But I think, look across. It doesn't have to be across cultural divide, but look at someone else and go, what is it like to be that person? It's like that Dave Matthews song, like, oh, could I have been, like I could have been anybody. I happen to be this, but that doesn't mean I'm not any better than anybody, but I can imagine what life is like for someone else. And as an artist, you are supposed to be sensitive and tuned into that, to what life is, and to imagine being somebody else, to imagine being something else, to imagine a world where things are different. To, like, if it's sci-fi or it's fantasy, that's an examination of your own world by changing some of the rules. And even if it's an escape or a fantasy thing, it can be, that's still commenting on our world, and what are we focusing on? What are we valuing in this world? So I really believe in, like, trying to imagine what life is like for other people. And if we did anything right in Avatar and Korra in that regard, I think it's because those characters that was just normal to them. We weren't like, if there was any reaction to a culture, it was from one character's perspective to another. It wasn't our perspective to that culture, like, as suburban American people, So, and look, the shift that's happening is long overdue. It is much needed. I welcome it. I'm not crying for, oh, but there's going to be less white people getting to make sure. Too good, whatever. You know what? Like phase us, to the background, and there's enough. We made enough stuff. And with Avatar Studios, we're trying to lift up and, to really set up, because Mike and I aren't going to be running these shows and stuff. We're coming up with a lot of the creative, but we're going to be setting up these productions and want to really give opportunities. When we were over at Netflix, they gave us passes to eat lunch with the animation crew, because they were like, you guys are nerds, like, you can go eat over there. And we knew like half the people in there, because the animation industry is very small. Sure. And if you don't know someone, you're like, oh, I know who that is, or you know somebody that knows someone. And at that time, it was really cool to see how much more diverse, not just the crews, because the crews, our crews were always, pretty diverse, but it's like the showrunners, the creators. And I was really excited about that. And I'd just like to see that more. I want to see shows from everybody. I want to see different perspectives, but I don't, I've talked to really awesome people who are not white, who are creators, and they're like, they don't want to have to only write from, like, I am only allowed to write from my perspective about my culture.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, they might want that opportunity. Like, I've wanted to tell my story and my culture and shit, and that's awesome. And I want to see that story too. But they might be like, I want to create a world or write about, things that aren't about, where I grew up or what my lineage is or something. And I think they should have, if they wanted, if someone, from Southeast Asia is like, I want to make a wizards and legends and lore Anglo-centric show. Well, go for it. I want to see that, that'd be pretty rad. Like,
yeah.
And stuff like that does happen. So I'd love to believe that people could do it with good intention and responsibly. That's easy for me to say because I'm in the middle of that. But that's where I try to operate, and I don't know. So I hope that answers your question, Ugo. Thank you.
Yeah, Ugo. Yeah.
Right.
How was that?
Right. It really was a wonderful question, and thank you for answering the specifics behind how you managed to take upon these cultures. Because as someone from whose parents and culture is from Nigeria, and with me developing my own work and my own concepts, it really is important. The most important thing to me is being able to include my culture and being able to create these stories with all of these diverse characters, and not even just from my culture, from multiple cultures.
Yeah.
And like paying respect to it. That's like my most important, the most important thing to me, paying proper respect to it and giving it the proper spotlight that it should be getting.
Yeah, I agree. And that, I want to segue that into, no matter what kind of show you're making, if it's a really silly, wacky show, if it's a super serious show, or one like ours that balances a bunch of tones, like whatever it is, I don't think this question of how to represent cultures or to create from that space is separate from writing these characters as real people. I think it's the same thing. And just setting the cultural thing aside, I think one difference about how we work and our writers work, like, I think of these characters as real. And for someone, on the outside, like maybe you're, at like a family reunion and there's some like brother-in-law who's a lawyer, and they're like, you're making a cartoon, like, don't take yourself too seriously there, pal. And it's like, it is serious. Like, even if you are making a silly cartoon, you've got to respect your characters as if they were real people. And I think of our characters that way. And that's why when our characters have been misinterpreted by other people in adaptations I'm not happy with, it hurts. It hurts, like, personally, because these are not just, this isn't intellectual property to me. It's not like, or if I did own the rights, like, those are I own that. It's like, they're like my children, and they're like real people. And the deeper you get into your own story, you need to listen to your characters, because they will start to become real to you, and they'll tell you what arc they need to go on. It's not that you're some sort of deity that's like, I'm going to pull the strings of fate and put them through things. They're going to tell you like what journey they need to go on and what choices they need to make. And you'll not say, I want this character to make this choice. You'll say, this character would make that choice, or they wouldn't, and to me, that is related. It's not separate from the questions of culture, because if you are treating that character like a real person, you are going to take into consideration where they came from, what they know, how was their worldview formed, what did they experience, what do the people around them experience, and also not thinking of cultures as monoliths. there is room in every culture for every type of personality. And we have a awesome Native American cultural consultant, and he talks about that all the time about, he wants to write genre. You want to have villains. It's like not just white America's like idealized version of something. You want to have characters who are flawed, who are damaged, who are human. They're human, and they'll run the whole gamut. So I think it's and again, I'm still learning, and I'm not perfect, and we're trying to do better. And Gene Yang, who we've had the honor of collaborating with, has a great, I wish I had this quote memorized, but he has a great quote about this, about not just writing what you know, but trying to write what you don't know, but doing it earnestly and honestly and respectfully. And he's like, and you will fail sometimes. You'll make mistakes, but it's worth it. And I'm paraphrasing. You should, find Gene's quote. He's much smarter than I am, and a better person. But I believe in that. I think Gene's onto something there, and I think it's worth the journey, even if you stumble a bit. And I look forward to seeing your show, Hugo. I'm going to keep an eye out.
Thank you very much. Thank you for speaking with me during this time.
Thanks. Take care.
Take care of yourself.
Thanks.
Man, that was great. Man, I love that bit. Just about like how we are gonna mess it up occasionally, but the whole notion is that we're trying, right?
Yeah. If you have good intentions and you're doing a good job, and then when you do mess up, just trying to course correct, but if you're dismissive or discount, or you're not willing to learn or to realize that, if you're not willing to say I don't know it all, then it's a dicier proposition, I think. I don't know. I'm trying. I'm trying to be like, I think just like accepting that we're not all like saints, and not as an excuse, but like go like, look, I'm not great. I'm not a great person. I'm a human. Now that I know that, let me try to be better. Not going, oh, I'm not perfect, so what does it matter what I do? No, like, you know what? I'm the character in the movie that finds out they're the villain and goes, crap, I better try to like right some wrongs before I'm off, so at least I could like do a little better. Like, that's kind of where I'm at, is just like, hey, that's where I woke up in the story. I'm going to try to do a little bit better and try to help some people out along the way. And,
Yeah, dang, I love that. That's fantastic, man. Bryan, everybody like on the call, Kira, we want to be really, really, Bryan, respectful of your time. But Kira, if you wanted to wrap it up, and thank you everybody for coming. Holy moly, this was amazing, and it's more than we could ever ask for, Bryan.
It's sincerely my pleasure and my honor. I was so excited when I heard about this organization. I think Andy Bialk told me about it, and he had started volunteering. I think I found out through him. And you reached out, and I really appreciate it. And it's been, mentoring for Rise Up has been one of the coolest parts of this past year for me. And I've really enjoyed getting to know the artists that I'm working with, and they blow me away. And I'm just like, I just want to see everybody get to shine, and get their foot in the door. And again, I think it's a good time to do it because there's just so much going on. There's so much stuff happening, and studios are finally like making an effort to be more inclusive, which is great. So if I can help a few people in any small way, it's like, it's absolutely worth my time. Look, I've been so fortunate. I've worked my tail off and all that, sure, but I've also been really lucky, and I could have not made it through the Super Mario Brother Gauntlet. Like, it could have knocked me out at any time. And I'm at a stage now where I'm like, I want to help other people get those chances, you know, and if there's some experiences that I picked up along the way that I can share. So I've been speaking with a lot of like classes, all different, you know, tiny little schools, little night schools, or big. I spoke to Yale. I'm like, I'm not smart enough to speak to any of you people, but I'll try, you know. So real honor to speak with all of you today. Thanks for spending 2 hours listening to me ramble on a Saturday. So
awesome.
It was a great 2 hours.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, okay. Just to quickly wrap up, where can we find you on social media if we want to reach out or anything? Or if we want to follow what you're doing?
You can follow, yeah. I don't interact on social media because I have a lot of people coming at me wanting, you know, wanting everything, want to pitch, want my number, want this, that, and the other. But yeah, I'm on Instagram. It's just my name. If you can spell my name, you can find it. And I do music too, and I've got a new album coming out on Tuesday, like some dance music.
Oh shit!
Yeah.
Put it out there.
I'll be posting it on my main account. Yeah. And then, yeah, you know, Mike and I, and we're building an awesome team, very slowly at Avatar Studios, small team, but we're working our way up, and it'll be years before that stuff's out, but so excited to share all that with everybody. We've got a bunch of cool stuff in the works. So yeah, I'm sort of, you know, I'm sort of in like a little bit in hibernation mode. But yeah, that's where I am.
Thank you for doing this, man.
Thank you.
Bryan, you are the salt of the earth, and it's really this is, you know, it's great to get to, you know, hear you talk and get to know you like on this panel. And wonderful human being, Kira. Thank you so much for coming moderating with me.
Yeah.
And
it's great to finally meet you, Bobby. Yeah, I'm so excited. I'm sure, again, our industry is very small, so I'm sure I'll run into you some more. So,
all right.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Yeah.
Bye. Take care, everyone.
Take care.
You left
Bye.
that. Bye, Kira. Bye, everybody. I was gonna say, is there like an Avatar like goodbye thing that we can all chant together? I don't know. I haven't watched the show enough, but like anyway.
I can't remember. It's been so long. It's yeah.
Wind, water. I don't know. Are you
It's like
earth or water or
I can be earth. Like, oh my god, I forgot how it goes. I know like it's like that.
I did a quiz and I thought it said I was earth, and I didn't know what that meant. I was like, so
wait,
I'm
what?
going to the ground soon.
I did like the Avatar quiz and I was like fire.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Right on. You were the opposite of fire, but yes, that's
Thanks.
all right, everybody. Take
All
care.
right.
Thank you so much, everyone, for showing up, and that was really awesome. And we're gonna put it on YouTube very soon. So
Yeah.
everybody.
Thank you.
Kira!
Bobby!
Okay. Bye, everybody. Have a great weekend. Yip,
Bye.
yip.
Yip, yip.